I spend a lot of time in this position after a full workday, with lacrosse ball on top of this thing, and to find out why, as well as other things I don't like about software development jobs, just keep watching this video. You may have seen movies or heard stories that programmers are people who just sit in a dark closet, write code, and don't really ever talk to anybody. Unfortunately, for me as an introvert, it is a totally incorrect assumption about what software developers do, because in fact we spend a lot of time in meetings and talking to other people about the new features we're going to develop, how we can reduce the amount of tech debt we have, and a bunch of other meetings that sometimes are not really necessary. So yeah, as an introvert, this is definitely one other thing I don't like, especially when all of these people around you are really smart and often smarter than you are. And while it is nice to be able to learn from them, some of them can be real jerks. And that again could be really demotivating, especially if there are types of people who just think that everything has to be done their way because they think that their way is the best way. But honestly, I do think that sometimes having more people on a project can actually cause more delays on that project, because now you have to solve any merge conflicts, figure out with other people what each person is working on, and distribute the amount of work equally, or hopefully equally. So yeah, that is definitely not a benefit on my list. My least favorite part of the job is having to sit for a long period of time. That's why you saw these things in the beginning of the video, and that's exactly why I have this autonomous chair and this autonomous standing desk behind me that I'm using to switch between standing and sitting. I also got this little slant board to stretch my calves while I'm standing to make sure that my legs don't get even tighter than they are already. But granted, this is not a problem specific to software development, but it is really specific to any computer jobs out there. Maybe it makes more sense to say that this is the thing I hate about 21st century. The other thing that I'm not really a fan of is that your work is always being watched, evaluated and commented on. Just imagine having a job where for 8 hours straight you have someone behind you telling you, hey, you did this thing wrong and you need to redo. Obviously it's not that bad, and most of the times we can work without anyone watching us, but the idea is that once you're done, you have to submit what you've done to one or more people to review, and everybody of course has got an opinion, and that can be a little demotivating. But there is a benefit to that, because more comments they leave, that means that you're not really that good and you probably need to learn anyways, and that's one of the best ways to learn how to become better. And honestly, I don't mind if you leave comments under this video to make sure that I can do better videos. And while your work is always being watched and commented on, the funny thing is that performance reviews are really subjective, because it is really hard to evaluate how good a developer is or how good of a job they have done in the last, for example, 3 to 6 months or even a year, because you cannot just evaluate them based on the number of lines of code they've written, because no code is better than more code. So we scratch that, then we could probably take a look at the number of features they've pushed to production, but again, there are developers who just work on reducing the number of tech debt, there are developers that write tests, and etc. So not everybody is constantly working on features, so that is not going to be fair as well. So really what it boils down to is whether your boss likes you and whether you were able to tell him how good of a job you've been doing. Now imagine that your wife asks you to fix something every single day. That's not a very good life to live, is it? So just imagine having a lot of frustrations every single day. Whether it's some bug that you've spent 2 or 3 hours looking for, or it may be something like a development environment setup that is having some issues pretty much every week and you have to constantly keep fixing it. or the version of the framework that you're using is way too old and you cannot just easily upgrade it.
Sometimes it doesn't work out. That's the job.
If you've been in tech for any number of years recently, you know that it just keeps advancing and a new framework pretty much comes out every day. That's not an issue only with the frameworks, but there are tools that are supposed to make developers' life a lot easier. And there are a lot of them. And if you look at a bunch of job requirements, it's like, how can one person possibly know all of that? So you spend a lot of your free time learning and not having enough time to do other things. Obviously, you can prioritize different things and you can skip learning, but then you get behind, especially if you're self-taught, where you have to constantly prove to people that your lack of degree doesn't necessarily mean you cannot code. And so a lot of your free time is spent catching up on these new technologies, reading books, articles, or taking online courses. And not having enough free time can be a really big deal when you work in a stressful environment. My last job, where I lasted only 5 months, was really stressful, and I actually lost about half a vision point just from stress and looking at the computer constantly. And I have definitely seen enough threads on Twitter where people complain about how low of a pay they get and how stressful their environments are. Obviously, your health should be more important than any kind of work that you're doing. So if you are too stressed and that is affecting your health, please just quit and find a new job. Another thing that sometimes bothers me is when a team has been working on the project for 2 or 3 months and then the business said, hey, we no longer need it, so all of your work has been wasted. It hasn't really happened to me directly, but it definitely happened to a few guys at one of the companies I worked at before. And that is really demotivating, not only for the people on the project, but also for other people in the same company, because they know that the business could just decide that whatever they've been doing for the last 3-6 months is just going to be wasted. And as developers, it is nice when your code goes into production and you can actually see it used. And these are all the things that I'm hating about software development today. If you want to see all the things that I do like about software development, click right here.